In Germany, you know, it's close to April, almost, in a week or so. And in Germany we have the saying, April, April, der macht, was will, which is April. April does what it wants or will. So we have all kinds of, we had rain, we had sunshine, we had hail, and we have snow now. Okay, I welcome you for our third day and the presentation of the results of working group number 2.
We started off with a title, Diversity in Doctoral Programmes, and we've already decided that it was slightly too definitive because we had obviously started to look at students and so on. So the current working title, and there'll be plenty more hot air pushed out before we've decided what the title really is Diversity in Doctoral Education. And we have many questions about that, especially the word diversity, which I will be able to come on to it a little bit later. Okay, some of the issues that came up as the data got collected were things that perhaps we partly had predicted, but clearly have an effect on how we analyse the information that we've got. Different educational structures. I mean, one that Bianca's already indicated. The UK's got an interesting problem, but which is that most students do not sign on to do a doctorate. They sign on to do an MPhil with the likelihood that they will transfer to a PhD. Our funding council has found a way of pretty well making sure that it can count the number of students that they would define as having started a doctorate by looking at the rate of transfer of those people, which means that the data we collected for this is okay. It really makes a mess of any completion rate data that the UK produces. Fortunately, we weren't looking for that. So there were very significant differences in the way the data was collected under the heading, under subject disciplines. There is a question around a number of countries, just out of our 11, as to what's defined as a domestic student, a non-domestic student, or international student. And, well, we probably will come back again to the question of what's diversity and ethnicity. What about the ethnic thing? I mean, we had the most incredible discussion in Melbourne about what we meant and what we were thinking about. And we realised from the countries that were there at the time that almost everyone had a different notion of defining their populations, okay? And it was something that Angelina said to me last night that made me eventually decide that what I wasn't going to do this morning is to try and present the data that we have got, because several countries, well, most of the countries, we really don't have data that is easy to present anyway. And we have this issue about how people explain themselves in terms of A, their population, and then B, the way their population spreads out in terms of anything from professors to doctoral students to undergraduates, how successful students are in school level. When I'd reached this point last night or early this morning, I was asking myself, what else have I got to say? And I thought, well, is that all? Is that all we've done? Well, we have got examples of policies, strategies, actions, and whatever that affect a significant number of the headings that I've talked about for a significant number of countries, including the kind of financial support and other kinds of support for doctoral students, how some countries are trying to increase the attractiveness of research and research career and a doctoral education, and issues about support for underrepresented groups. I think what we were interested in at the start was what the drivers were. This is very much my view of what I've seen. This is not the sort of thing that we probably discussed in the group, but most countries that have a positive policy in relation to doctoral education talk about it in relation to economic development, economic regeneration, better economic generation. It's all about the economic powerhouse of of doctoral education and the effect that it's going to have on the economy of the country. There's very little about anything else, although kind of social issues have begun to slip in from time to time more recently. And I think Terry has already touched on this. In looking for, and this is something that was very obvious from the data, in looking for some indication of whether people have been doing something specifically to increase the number of doctoral students, there's relatively little evidence of that, except for financial point. There's been relatively little other pull into doctoral education, and looking at underrepresented groups in doctoral education. What there has been at a lower level in education, the kind of thing that was described for Australia, is encouragement at the lower level of education to underrepresented groups, which may well have a push effect into doctoral education. And to a significant extent, there's been discussion about the underrepresentation of groups at, well, let's say, lecturer, reader, professor, head of department, dean, vice-chancellor, and so on in a number of countries as well. So where's it all heading? Which I think you must be wondering by now, Marisi. What we hope, and this is a very limited statement about what we intend. We ought to be able to generate a narrative that takes account of all the country data and all the country commentaries that we have. Am I overstating this? I'll be attacked when this meeting's over, when this session's over, by my colleagues, and to present it not in terms of what happens in one country, what happens in another country. We did have this problem that basically we had what I describe as a kind of vertical collection of information. That is, we've got a collection of data, commentary, and everything else on each country. We're very keen not to make that the structure of the chapter, and we believe that it's going to be possible to cut a horizontal set of layers which describe under the themes, the kind of themes that I started off with here, where we believe we are. There are issues already about wanting to see a common approach to the taxonomy of subject categories so that we can compare, it's possible to compare one country with another. Collection of data in some kind of common format, which is another issue that would make life so much easier. Even if the common format was to change from time to time, we know subject categories change from time to time, but it would be much easier if we had that. So we would like to make those kind of recommendations to the countries of the world, if you like. And maybe I've overstated this at the moment, but certainly an encouragement to look at underrepresented groups, which many countries just don't do, and ask themselves some questions about whether they've been doing the right thing, whether there's a need for them to consider carefully. And this connects with Chapter 1, it connects with what Jessica talked about earlier too, in a specific kind of way, and it connects with the theme of the conference really. And one thing that I haven't mentioned is there was only one country that collected any information about disability, which was the UK, and that is really peculiar information. I mean, apart from anything else, just like an ethnic grouping, people self-identify as to whether they're disabled, yeah? And the data that is available is all about whether people have got disability allowances or not, which is not a proper way. So that's why there's no description on a slide here of that kind of information. So I thought if I got to this point, I could say thank you for listening to all of us.